I mean, usually I have my fingers to the pulse of movies, but this Indian film to me came out of freaking nowhere. Was it a good experience? We will find out with these hands. Anyway, the reason I did this with my hands because people are like, he talked with his hands. Well, you want me to just talk like this? No, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, Chase Liaki here with a Blue Futon reviewing Kanguva. I'm saying that completely wrong. It's Kanguva. Yes, that's how you say it. What's it about? I'm not going to call it a simple premise. We are in two timelines, 2024, 1070. And how is this man and child connected 1,000 years apart? Okay, not completely 1,000 years apart, but you know what I mean. And we're going to figure it out in an interestingly different storytelling. So first off, I was going into this movie thinking, is there going to be a part 2 or is this a single story? Haha, there is going to be a part 2. Through and throughout, period, end of subject. That's all I'm going to say, spoilers. But anyway, with this movie, I think the story is interesting. It's better than the one I did, like Dara, that I watched part 1, the one with the sea creature one, and he was like Aquaman at the very end. It's better than that one, for sure. Some of the CGI didn't work for me, but I think that one is bombastic, is interesting enough, and had a good amount of details that I did enjoy this overall. But I did have some glaring flaws. So let's talk about the positives first. Okay, positives. The teeth. You're thinking, what are you talking about? I appreciate good makeup when I see it and knowing what time it is and like what period. I hate watching movies from like the 1700s and everyone has perfect teeth. No, not here. They do good with the makeup with the teeth effect. They also do good with the actual brutality and kind of showing it, but kind of not showing it. And what I mean by that, I just love it how we have a lot of these like woke people that are like Native Americans and Indians or, you know, other part of the world, Genghis Khan part of the world. They weren't as violent. No, in America, Native Americans, Indians, wherever you want to call them, because I know it changes every time, killed each other for land. Genghis Khan killed people for land. The Romans killed people for land. So I hate it when it's like always like one specific race does something where it's like, no, listen, there's always been killing. There's always been brutality. And what I liked is the dialogue with some of these females telling the men that are going to battles, bring me their skin, bring me their skulls, bring me their blood. And you're like, yes, there's brutality like that. And I like how they actually showed it and had some good dialogue scenes with that. The fight sequence. One of the best fight sequences in this movie is with the snow. That's all I'm going to say. It's brutal, it's fun, and that's where I go the oh snap moment with some of the killing. I do find interesting, though, when it comes to Indian films, like now I'm talking about India, because I know Indians and Native Americans. I know, right? A little bit confusing when you're just like talking about, and okay, you know what I mean. Okay, so with that, I always get confused where you see some pretty decent gore, but then sometimes when hands are getting chopped off, they, blur it. I don't know if it's a region of India that sometimes blur, because like I said, there's some movies that they don't blur, like Animal, they don't blur the gore in that one. So it's one of the interesting things where I just kind of go like, I wonder why some Indian movies do it and some don't. All right, story-wise, I think it is interesting. It didn't like go completely out of left field, but it keeps you guessing, and it doesn't really give you enough answers to be like, why is this connected? You understand that there is some supernatural element to it, but you are intrigued about where the second story can go. It's not like you're like eye rolling. Yes, there might be some eye rolling moments, especially with some of the acting. We'll talk about that later. But it was more of like, okay, I like how this is going to try to connect and how it's like a weird wavelength where they're just like, even though they're like, I don't know what's happening to my body, but I feel like I have to go. And I did like that style of, that storytelling element. Editing. Some of the editing is pretty damn good with how we're fighting or like following some fight sequences. But then we're going to slowly start going to the negative of the film. Some of the editing isn't good, especially at the airport scene at the very end. There's a scene where it's like a Jeep and this truck van is about to collide, and they barely show it. You gotta let that, you gotta let it go. You gotta let the audience see because it looked pretty damn realistic, and they were actually doing the crash. Same with some of the editing, with some of the fight sequences, where it's a lot of jankiness, especially with the first 30 minutes. The first 30 minutes isn't in the 1070s to 2024, and there is weird camera movements, weird editing with some of the fight sequences, and like I said, the first 30 minutes, I did not like this film. I didn't know where it was going. I didn't understand the humor, because when I looked at the poster, I was expecting something about that, but we start off on kind of like, looking at the moon, which I think the moon is the reason why they're connected, but I want to know why. But anyway, you start off with like 1070 with the moon kind of like talking about the story, and then we go to 2024, and it goes to a complete like bounty hunter lovers, and the humor was out of left field. And I was like, what did I get myself into? I don't know if I'm going to like this film, but it did kind of grow on me when the kid was involved in doing that. Even though when the kid is involved, you're intrigued, but the bad guys that are going after the kids, horrific acting, horrific post-production after effects of the voices. It just didn't sound good, and it was very just stale. It was like one dimension, like, look, he is controlling the plane. No way, we need to cut his head off. And you're just like, whoa, this post-production voice is not working at all. It is not working at all. And like I said, some of the acting just very stiff with these bodyguards in this Russian facility, as well as the plane. The plane scene. All right. This cat is literally hanging off the plane in midair for like 20 minutes. Just like, no ropes are hanging on. He's just using his bare hands. You're just like, okay, this is not believable whatsoever. Yes, this movie isn't believable, but at a point, you gotta like reel it in for the viewers to like have some believability with some of these characters and what they're actually doing. And so, like I said, I didn't mind, or I didn't really like some of the side characters, like the guns, and the guy was like crazy, like, just going crazy. It's like, shooting guns in the air like this ain't gonna do nothing for you. It ain't gonna help the guy that needs you to actually shoot the bad guys. So there was that. Positive. The crocodile fight scene, pretty damn good. I'll give it that. That was something that's pretty good. But also, the kid started yelling "mother" a lot and started getting annoying. It was like, "Mother! Mother! Mother!" And the crocodile scene, that's something that happened at the very end of the movie too. It was like, "Mother! Ah! Mother! Ah!" And you're like, okay, simmer down, simmer down. Maybe because the theater was like 10 times too loud. You're just like, whoa, it's everywhere. So what are we going to try to do with it? But, okay, the overall experience of this movie, I'm going to say it wrong again, Kanguva, horrible white person stupidness right there. But it's an interesting premise, interesting film. I liked it more than a couple of the Indian movies that I've already seen this year. Like, Kalki, I prefer this over Kalki. Guilty. Darha, I think I'm saying that part one, it was another weird one that, it ended really bad with the random sharks and him being Aquaman. This one, at least I felt the brutality of like, being in 1070. I was like, okay, this is believable. They don't care. They're just going to try to do what they can do. And some of it's brutal. Some CGI worked, some didn't. Like I said, there's some CGI where it's like, or like realism, like, oh, we're putting this knife through this guy's face. Then other times, when they're killing the Romans, it's like, that's a CGI knife going through them. That's a CGI knife going through them. So I always wonder when they decided to do that and when they decided not to do that. But the overall experience, I think it is fun enough. It's intriguing enough. But you got to ignore some of the bad editing. You got to ignore some of the bad acting with these Russians. So bad. But when I left the theater, I was like, I can, and I'm ready for part 2. So Kanguva will receive a 3.5 out of 5 Futons. He was at 70%. And I promise you, if that first 30 minutes went any longer, this would have been a 50 or 60% movie. But it truly, truly increased in productivity and just quality. Let's see if any critics or review scores have given this a review yet. Looks like it's 0, so I'm the first one. So 70%. Am I drunk off just high of funness? Chase like here at the Blue Futon. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if things Futontopia. You Blue Futonians, thank you for watching. Have a great day. I don't care what to say tomorrow, week, for a month, or a year, for every single freaking one of you. Peace and love, and let me know in the comments below if I'm right or wrong with this Indian film.